When did you know that you had more than what you thought you had?
Hmm, that's a tough question. How did I more than what I had in what way?
It could be physical, it could be spiritual, it could be emotional, like it could be mental. Because sometimes we think we're tapped out, but we're actually not. We have a little bit more in the tank.
Mm. Hmm. I can think of one recent example
Mm-hmm.
when I decided to go ahead with my trip to New York City, and I was not in good shape physically. Maybe shouldn't have gone, and I went anyway. And I treated myself so carefully, but I managed to get there and enjoy the trip. But it involved using wheelchair assist at the airport, which was a kind of embarrassing, humbling, weird thing because I am norm in general healthy and high energy. So the idea that I'm sitting in a wheelchair getting pushed around the airport was very odd for me. But I had enough and I just needed to be there. And it shocked me that I had enough to actually make it happen.
That was your first time going to New York?
No, I was actually born in New York City.
Oh, okay.
So New York City's my home in a relative sense of speaking. I lived in New York City my first 7 years of my life and then moved away, came back to more upstate New York, and then have since been in the Midwest predominantly for the
Uh,
last 20-ish years. And I started going back about 7, 8 years now.
mm-hmm.
I went back and I try to go back at least once a year just to kind of feed my soul and to be in that space. And because of the pandemic, I hadn't been in almost 2 years and it was just too long. And I just said I needed, and that was that need to go because
Right,
I couldn't
right.
have it be another 3, 4, 5, 7 years. It was
Oh
like,
man, I
no, I
know.
needed to be there. And so I went.
I'm glad to hear that it went well.
Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space Podcast. I am your host, Leah. I appreciate everyone for tuning in, especially to this episode. We are in our first installment of the Survivor series, which is kind of Survivor series, meaning it doesn't really have a great connotation with me. So I'm probably going to end up calling it more than a Conqueror series. But I had this amazing conversation with Jaimie, and I'm glad that you decided to be on the show. Um, we talked about her life story, and I was just like, yes, I want you on the show, but what series can we put you in? And it's like, let's start a whole new series. So, Jaimie, thank you so much for wanting to be on the show. Thank you for coming on and wanting to have a conversation with me. Can you please tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Happy to, and thank you for inviting me to be on. So I wear, like a lot of us, I wear a number of hats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mother to two teenagers. That is interesting all in of itself. I'm a mom of teenagers. I'm a sister. I am a full-time nonprofit fundraising professional. I am an author, and I am also a survivor. Hence, being on this series.
Yeah, the idea of being a survivor is lost on some because we feel that the pain or the trauma that we experience is normalized after so long, right?
Hmm.
So after we experience so many things, good, bad, or indifferent, we tend to normalize it, and we don't realize how much survival there is. And the so I guess what I really want to do is just hear more of your story, because what I want to do with this series really is to give people hope and let people know that, as cliche as it sounds, you're not alone, and that it is possible to go from being in one situation, like changing your surroundings, changing your environment. It's not the easiest thing. I'll tell you that. I will say that it is not the easiest thing, but it is something that is absolutely necessary for people to experience, to understand what is actually in them.
That is so, so very true. And you got me thinking, I completed a survey yesterday, just unexpected. We want some feedback, and it was actually through my work, but it was external. And
Okay.
one of the later questions of the demographics at the end was kind of a check the box, and it was about cancer and survivorship. And it was, are you a survivor? Or do you currently have cancer? Do you have friends and family who have cancer? And for a second, I thought, I don't know what box to check. So I was diagnosed with cancer in 2018,
Mm,
went through surgery, went through treatments, thought, here I am. I'm done. I am a survivor. I had cancer. And then fast forward to spring of 2021, so just not even 6 months ago now, I found out that my cancer is back. So
mm.
now on a daily basis, if someone my default is to say I'm a survivor, and I'm like, "Well, I am a survivor, but I'm also actually in treatment right now for cancer." So there's that question of, am I a survivor? And where I am right now is I get to decide. And so I feel like I still say I'm a survivor because I did survive that diagnosis. And I think we get to
Yes.
decide who we are. And I survived that diagnosis. And honestly, I feel like right now, every day I'm still alive. I guess I am still a survivor.
I like that outlook. When when you were told that, oh, you're free and clear, there's no more cancer, was it a different cancer that came back or was it the same one?
Same but different. So I had had breast cancer and I had had surgery. I had a double mastectomy, and so my body
Mm,
completely changed as a result, but the thought was that was the best treatment plan for me,
okay.
and I don't have any regrets making that choice. And then fast forward to 2021, I give my doctor, my oncologist, all the credit in the world because I had had some back pain and I didn't make the connection of back pain and breast cancers. I'm thinking, well,
Hmm.
that was that, and I also had that treatment and I'm good, but the back pain wasn't going away. I saw my oncologist for just a routine blood work because that was something I did, and the blood work was fine. The blood work didn't show anything. It seemed like I was still great. But
Mm.
then he, because he is a wonderful human being, just asked the question, "Well, how are you doing? How's life?" I said, "Oh, well, I mean, my back hurts all the time." Like it was no big deal. But in his mind, that was a like, whoa, 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 hold on. Why does your back hurt all the time? And maybe we
Right,
should look
right.
into that. Sure enough, so I have metastatic breast cancer, which means I have the breast cancer was kind of lingering, as my doctor would say. It was like it was asleep, like maybe there was a cell or two that was asleep and it
Mm,
woke up and it woke up someplace else. So there was a tumor wrapped around my spine, which is why I was having so many back problems.
wow.
But I didn't make that, and I probably wouldn't have made that connection at all. So I'm so grateful that my doctor asked that question. If he hadn't asked, "Hey, how's it going?" I probably wouldn't have said anything different. I would have went on with
Right.
my good blood work, and the cancer probably would be spreading rapidly throughout my body. So
Wow.
same but different.
What has your support system been like through this entire ordeal?
I have amazing friends who are like family, and I am incredibly grateful because I don't have family who lives in the area. So I, growing up on the East Coast, I'm in the Midwest. I have one sibling who's in the Midwest, but a good 6 hours away, and then
Mm,
my parents, and I have other siblings that are all on the East Coast. So as far as being here and dropping food off, that wasn't even a possibility. It never was a possibility the
right.
first time I was diagnosed or now. The first time I was diagnosed, I had a husband, and he did his best to be helpful, but he also made some choices that turned things imploded, and I am not married to him anymore. So
Mm,
now going through this a second time, not being married has been interesting because I don't have someone here, just even a person that's here all the time.
mm, mhm.
But what I found is that support can come in a lot of different ways. And I've had friends, oh, they're sending me Grubhub gift cards, or can I come over and buy you lunch? And I have friends that drive me to treatment, and I'm just very, very, very blessed to have a great support network that even though we don't happen to be related by blood, they're my family.
How has that affected your relationship with your children?
It's been interesting. I honestly think it was worse the first time because when my diagnosis when I found out about my diagnosis and they told them their frame of reference, I have a brother who had cancer and he passed away. So in their
Oh,
mind, it was, "Oh, you have cancer, you'll probably die because Uncle Corey died." And they were, maybe 6 and 8, something like that when he died. So definitely old enough to remember him, old enough that they had memories. We went
right.
to his funeral. So they have all these thoughts wrapped up in a cancer diagnosis and death. So me having it then I think was super duper scary, but I try to take it in stride and still live my life best I can. And I think this diagnosis was more of like, ugh, this sucks, but not I think as scary maybe because it was like, well, you were okay the last time, so hopefully you'll be okay again.
Right, right.
And when I'm having my really, really bad days, which I've had some, I try really hard not to let that onto them. I feel like it's not fair to them. It's not fair to have, I mean, they're almost gonna be adults really soon, but they're still 15 and 17. So the idea of me dumping on them, I feel like is just not fair. So that's when I lean on my friends and they know though that maybe I need to take it easy or maybe I need to rest a little bit. And it is easier because they are teenagers. So they don't need it'd be different if they were toddlers. And I'm fortunate in that I'm so glad I didn't have this when thank goodness I didn't have this when they were 2 and 3 years old. And now they're 15 and 17. And so I have a super adorable can I share a super adorable story about one of my kids in this?
Absolutely.
Because I think this is just the sweetest. And I didn't even remember. So this summer we decided to go to Chicago. I'm about like 2.5 hours away. And just for a day, just wanted to see the city. They had seen it years ago, but not in a while. So I have had some issues with the way food tastes, which is very troublesome to my soul because I love to eat and I love to eat and I love certain foods and some of my favorite foods just don't taste right. It's hard to explain. They don't taste it's not like they taste rotten. They don't taste how they're supposed to taste. And there's no rhyme or reason either, thinking, well, this tastes okay, so this should taste okay. No, it doesn't. So one of the things that hasn't been good, just in general, is dairy. I don't know. Some dairy is okay, but a lot of dairy, not so much. We're leading up to the trip, and my son, he was at his dad's and they're with me half the time. And he calls me during a work day, of course, because he doesn't really care. And he was talking to me, "Oh, I thought we could go here and I thought we could go there." I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." And then one of the last things he said, "Well, I know that like ice cream probably wouldn't be good for you. So I did a search and I found gelato and gelato doesn't have dairy. So I thought we could go to a gelato place and that might be good for you." And he's 15.
How thoughtful.
Like, so thoughtful. I feel like that is
Just
not a typical teen thing, and not to get into gender roles, but I think boys also might not be you might not expect that from a 15-year-old male. And sure enough, we did go to that gelato place and it was good. But the fact that he found it, researched it, and wanted to go because he thought it would be good.
wow. That's awesome. That's so cute.
It is so cute. So it's been all things considered good. And I feel like they're handling it well, and hopefully I'm helping them handle it well. At least I'm trying. Because being a teenager is hard enough. Like
Right.
being a teen, just in general of life, is hard, and then to be piling on more trauma for them. No thanks. I don't want to do that to them. I mean, they already have to. I mean, they already have a mom who has cancer, but as far as the struggles, I don't need to pile that on top.
No,
I don't think.
I like that point of view. How have you dealt with the changing relationships that you've experienced during this time? Like, I know that you said your relationships with your children changed a bit, but it sounds like you all grew closer, which is amazing. Um, your relationship with your then husband changed, and you had some friends who've come closer. But how have you handled the changes in your relationships?
Honestly depends on the relationship because some have grown stronger and better. So, of course, that feels wonderful and grateful. And, the person who was my best friend, still my best friend, still talk every single day. And I mean, even back 3 years ago when I was first diagnosed, she knew about my diagnosis before my husband. And it wasn't that I made a plan of that, it's that she knew when I had my appointment. She knew the day of and then reached out and said, like, how'd it go? How are you doing? What's going on? And I wasn't gonna not tell her or lie to her. So it just worked out that she knew first, and that's not a surprise at all. So our relationship has just gotten stronger and it's great. And then the relationships that have fallen away, it's harder. And in fact, the best friend just sent me this message, this meme yesterday that was, I'll butcher it, but it's something like, you can grieve the loss of a relationship even if it's a toxic relationship. So there's definitely some grief, some people that that I was closer with and now I'm not. And there's a little bit of sadness, but I try just to let myself be sad. So because I think as a rule we stuff down our emotions way too much. And I think if I need to be sad, I need to be sad. And I was having a time, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I don't remember. And the following day, I'm on the phone with or telehealth appointment with my therapist and said, basically, I was really, really having a moment the day before and kind of like, what would you suggest I do? But then I'll tell you after what I actually did do because I wanted to see like, am I on the right path here for my mental health? And her advice was just to dig into the feelings. Like if you're feeling bad, allow yourself to feel bad. And I said, "Oh, okay, great." So basically that's what I did. So when I was having this moment and I was just really sad, and I don't even remember what I was sad about. I decided to specifically go on to Spotify and I found a playlist that was like romantic love songs from movies. And pressed play and just sat there and just was like crying. Music, I'm very, very connected to music. So a song will make me cry, a song will make me laugh, a song will make me think of a good memory. So music is very powerful for me. So yeah, I just love songs from those soundtracks. And I just cried for a while. And then I actually let myself cry for a while, but then I was able to just get back to work. So I think it's better for me. Whereas if that thing where you try not to, like, I'm going to try not to cry, I'm going to try not to be sad, it just makes it last even longer.
It's that torment that we
Mhm.
just stuff down all the feelings and hope that somehow they'll disappear,
Mm,
but they're
exactly. Because
multiplying. And it's aggravating because I don't want to dig into my feelings. Feelings and emotions are not my strong suit. So no, push past those. Like let me just not feel the things. But and which brings me to another question that I was going to ask, which was if you did go to therapy throughout this ordeal, and it sounds like you did, which is great
Absolutely.
because your positive outlook and how you're seeing things, especially in hindsight, it's like you're able to take it as it comes, which is amazing because a lot of people are not really in that headspace, and um, they don't have the support system or the access to mental health services, or even the wherewithal to know where do I start, how do I deal. But I like what you said about dealing with the emotion then. So if you feel sad, just let it happen. Just
Feel
like
sad. Mhm.
you can't direct the song, you're not the conductor. Let the song happen.
I love
Let
that.
it build up, and then it'll go away. Just feel it, because
Mhm.
if you don't ride the wave, you're just constantly running from it until it turns to a tsunami, and now you're wondering what just happened?
Why did I just and it the tsunami is gonna completely take you out, and you might be
Yes.
taken out, whereas if you just let that one wave crash into you and feel the crash of that wave, then you're
Yeah.
what? And you just carry on with your day, as opposed to being demolished by the tsunami.
Right. But I think that also comes with practice too. Because
Mhm.
even as a kid, I didn't really deal with my emotions that well. I was the joy from inside out. Like, let me just get to the happy stuff. I don't want to deal with the sad stuff. I don't want to be angry and bitter. So let me just be happy. And then as I became an adult, learning that, oh, this sadness only lasted for two soundtracks. Great. Now I can move on with the rest of my day. But like learning how to manage those emotions really came from, going to therapy to unpack and get to the root of it. So it just warms my heart that you're going to therapy.
It's the best.
It's just,
I just feel like
oh,
I'm like, everybody should go to therapy, it's so great, and it's not
right.
great, and that it's not fun, and it's hard, and it can be really hard and painful, and depending on what you're, as you said, unpacking,
Hmm.
but I feel like at the end, you're so much better off.
Absolutely. It is
And
work. It is a lot. We just did the mental health series, and all of those mental health care workers will tell you, as long as you're willing to do the work, it works. But it is a lot of work.
and I was fortunate in that I connected with this therapist kind of in summer 19, so it was, like, in between time. I
Oh,
was
okay.
just ending I had another traumatic situation to deal with and met her for that reason, but the cancer piece I felt like, "Oh, I'm kind of done with this." So, I've built this relationship over 2 years because I
Mm-hmm.
do think if I had had a diagnosis and just trying to find a therapist then, that might have been really, really hard because you're trying to just deal with and then to find a
Right.
therapist, and I do think you have to find the right therapist, which that's hard too because I've worked with therapists that are not the right match for me, and
Yes.
maybe they'd be a good match for someone else, but not for me, and now this person, great match, work well together, learned a lot, and I feel like I'm still learning. I mean, even that story from a few weeks ago was like, is this a good way to handle this? I'm not even sure, and then it's like, "You're the expert, you're the mental health expert, so I'm gonna ask you," and keep working at it.
It's great when you can get that reassurance, and you are absolutely right, because finding the right therapist is like dating in 2021. It's You have to make sure that you're both compatible. You don't want someone who's just going to be your yes man, but you also want someone who's going to hold you accountable and, give you real applicable information. Give me just a moment, okay?
Mhm.
Sorry about that. My sister and nephew just came in, and I just heard his toys downstairs. I was like, I'm recording. I don't want to get that into the thing. Okay.
Way to handle it head on, be proactive.
Yes. um, so wait, what was the question I was going to ask? We were talking about therapy. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your book.
Okay.
When did you publish your book?
My book was published in September of 2021. So
Oh,
as of the
okay.
time of this recording, about 2 months just 2 months ago, 2 months and a few days.
Is this your first book?
Yes, it is.
Oh, what
First book.
inspired you? Have you always been a writer, or was this something where you like, I have a message?
Um, I wouldn't say I've always been a writer in that other than I'm very crafty at writing cutely little social media posts. That's about it. Like, that's my realm of writing was social media, and that was it. But the idea of a whole book, I did not really plan on writing this book.
Huh.
It started out September of 19 when I had really made some decisions about my marriage. And I will say marriage in air quotes because we weren't really together anymore, but we weren't together romantically at all. But we were still
Hmm.
living together, which,
Okay.
oof, if anyone ever done that, I don't recommend it. Or at least it did not work for me. The idea of being friendly with your ex and living in the same place, no me gusta. But that's what was happening. I was living that life and then made some decisions. Surprise, surprise, when I was in New York City with my good friend, because I make these big decisions and have these like powerful life moments when I'm in New York. And when I came back, I wrote some things down and it was just kind of writing how I felt and again, almost just scribbling notes and
Hmm.
didn't do much with it. Fast forward to March of 2020 when the world turned upside down for all of us
Right.
and I had the unique, well, it's not unique to everybody, but to some, the scenario of that I have my children every other week. So I went 1 week where I have two teenagers and we're here all of the time, which I was not used to that. I was not used to being with them all of the time. But then fast forward to the following week, I'm completely alone. And I
Mm,
am a very high extrovert. Anybody who knows me knows that. And so part of that is that it's not just you like being around people, you actually gain energy from being in people's spaces. So I felt like I was just drained and draining all of the time, and there was no way to refill my bucket. And I
right.
did there were some the Zoom calls and virtual events, and I did some of those, but
It's not
it
the
wasn't the same.
same.
Not the same as being in the same space. It's not the same as hugging someone. Oh, the idea of hugging people, I missed so much. And I hit this point, I don't even remember. It's probably late March or April where I get these weird, odd, stubborn things about me. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, well, fine. I can't see my friends. I'm all alone. I can't do anything. I can't see anyone. I guess I'll just write my book. And that's how it happens. So I started spending lots and lots of my time alone writing because I would work. I had a full time job, and I'm so grateful that I had and have the job that I do. So I would work. Was already working from home. So I'd work from home, but I'd be done at 5 o'clock thinking, well, now what do I do? And sure, I could go for a walk around the neighborhood and things like that. But it was a long time in the evening, especially if you're used to having a social life. I had a great social
Yeah.
life, and now it was like, well, you can't do any of the things you're used to doing. So even going to take a walk, I'm like, well, okay, there's still how many hours before bedtime?
Right.
So I just dug in and started writing a lot. And then in the summer of 2020, I was had a lot written, but it wasn't good. And I knew it wasn't good because I just kind of verbal vomit on the keyboard and
Mm,
but it wasn't a good story. So I decided to work with an editor and that helped tremendously. I mean, the thought of where the book was before her and now it's not even the same book. And so I worked with this editor and she was amazing and we messaged back and forth and just sent Microsoft Word with tracking changes back and forth and made changes and till it was finally like, oh, this is a pretty good book. And I started looking into agents and publishers and there's so much and even now I'm published and I still feel like there's so much I don't know because this wasn't a background or a field for me. So I feel like I'm just making it up as I go along, but it's working.
it sounds like life.
Right, right.
What's the name
Just
of your
going
book?
along with it. It's called From Queens to Queens: How the Madison Drag Community Saved My Life.
So let's talk about what's happened in the book. So this is from your life of does it start with you as a child or does it start with like where you were at that time?
There's a very brief mention of my childhood and the fact just even the fact that I lived in New York. So it's kind of
Okay.
that a very brief overview like I was born here and then I moved away and then I came back fast forward and then it fast forwards
Okay.
to years later as an adult. So the predominant writing is from about 2017 to summer 2020. So those
Oh, okay.
those years are the bulk of the book.
Okay. So, how did Queen save your life?
So, I if you rewind back to 2017, I knew that drag existed. I mean, I knew it was an art form. I'd heard of it, but I had never seen a drag show. I
Hmm.
had never seen an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, which my friend Charisma would say, "Jaimie, you're a terrible human being." Fair enough. How terrible. I'd never seen Drag Race. So, but I hadn't. And I was in a musical in a local community theater, and my dear, dear friend Josh was the choreographer. Josh happened to also perform as a drag queen sometimes, and I don't know if I knew that all along or when I found out. I'm not even sure, but I knew him as Josh. And then the musical ended. Josh texted me and said, "Do you want to be a backup dancer in a drag show pageant?" Of course, I said yes immediately. I didn't even think about it. I'm like, well, yeah, why would I say no to that? So I met Josh, and then I met three other people who happened to perform as queens as well. But when I met them as Michael, Dan, and Jacob. I met them out of drag. So I have a unique perspective in that, like, I met queens, but I met them as humans outside of drag. So it's like I met Josh and Michael and Dan and Jacob. And then it was like, oh, these are my friends who happen to do this.
Ah,
Where I think
okay.
that's very different from most people who probably just walk into a drag show and you see the queens in drag, and then maybe you, and a lot of people I think don't have the opportunity to even meet them out of drag. I guess it depends on the situation. But for me, again, it's like I met them in their true presenting selves, and then it was like, oh, they just put on this costume. It was almost like, oh, this is my friend Jacob, and Jacob happens to put on makeup, a wig, and a dress, and then is chaos. So
Okay.
we did a lot of rehearsing. We did our number. I went to my first drag show and I loved it. I was thinking, where has this been my whole life? Because for me, it was almost like mini musicals all night, which I love musicals. So you
Hmm.
see these people you see the gowns and cute outfits and the music and the wigs and the makeup, and I was just in love. And then I just started going to shows more and more. And at the
Hmm.
time I was going to the shows with my husband, he enjoyed it too. So we started going more, and then my diagnosis happened, and I was in a really, really low place. Even just the start of my diagnosis. So I said I had a mastectomy. So, as I like to say, the display case is empty. Most people would understand what that means.
Mm.
So I went to a drag show 4 days after my surgery, because why not? I mean, I could recover at home sitting, but I could also sit at a show. And this queen who I didn't really know at the time, I knew who she was, but we hadn't met, hadn't become friends. And during the show, she likes to, especially like the halfway point, she walks around and banters with people in the audience. And she looks at my husband and was like, "Ooh, who are you here with?" Because he's a very metrosexual, kind of handsome man that a lot of gay men thought maybe were gay. I mean, that
Hmm.
was a normal thing. So he looks and says, "Oh, I'm with my wife." And the queen kind of just turns her head a little bit and looks at me, says, "You're pretty, like really pretty," but not in this rude, condescending Regina George way. But I think it was just like she actually meant it. And here I was. I was wearing my daughter's button-down shirt that I had been wearing the last 3 days from surgery. Like I think the shirt hadn't been washed in 3 days. My hair hadn't been washed. I have this new body that I'm not really excited about. I am not looking good. And for her to say that, it just very much took me aback, and I wanted to just start crying, but I was crying in my head. So you have this positivity, then the marriage implodes, things fall apart, and I'm at my absolute lowest, 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 because I'm going through treatment, I'm in
Hmm.
chemotherapy, I don't have
Hmm.
hair. I am willing to admit that I am a vain human who likes hair. I When I didn't have hair, oh, I and people will say, "Oh, bald is beautiful," and I know they mean well, and for some, and I have seen some humans who either have the buzz cut or bald, and they do look amazing. I'm like, that is, you look incredible. But for me, I'm like, no. Like, again, it's a nice thing to say, but I don't believe it. So there I was, not the body I wanted, no hair, pretty much, no husband anymore when I didn't plan on that happening. So there I was. And I just started going to this one nightclub, five nightclub, my favorite place, more and more and more. And I would be hysterically crying on the way to the show because of just where I was, especially mostly because of the ex-husband. And I'd be crying and like tears are just streaming down my face during my 5-minute drive. And I'd park in the parking lot and just wipe my face and say, "You can't cry at a drag show." And then I would go in and I'd be surrounded just by all this joy and love and a place where everyone's accepted for who they are, and which is not always a sentiment that's widely put out there. And of course, I'm not feeling that great about myself. And I'd walk in, "Hey, hey, fabulous. How are you? Oh, hello, gorgeous." And I don't think they were saying it just to make me feel better. I mean, maybe they were. And if they were, that's okay. It worked. But I was at this low place and just being dumped on with all this love and positivity and complimentary words. I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have them at that time. And now, I mean, they're still, they became my second family.
How cool is it that something so different and just something, because it's almost out of left field for you.
Very much so, yes. Again, I had never even seen a drag show in my life, and now these are some of my best friends.
And that, I mean, it's just like excuse me, to have something like that is awesome, that you can enjoy, that you can be surrounded by and feel the love and appreciation for life, just being surrounded by people who love life and who can make you feel good, and that you can start returning that. And sometimes, well, a lot of times, being that kind of in that kind of environment helps you internalize, like, I am fabulous, you are fabulous, we're fabulous together. Oh, you're beautiful, I'm beautiful, we're all beautiful. Like, it's
Yes.
there's such an appreciation that happens when you're a part of a group or a situation where you can start recycling positive thoughts to kind of fish out those negative ones, and start really feeling that, oh my gosh, this is good. I do feel better. I'm sitting up straighter. My chest is out. Like, I'm feeling a lot better. Like, this is awesome.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, it's that, I love that, like recycled joy, because it's like they're putting it out to me and then I'm accepting it and then I'm putting it back out. And it's just this,
Yeah.
the best, not a vicious cycle, but like the best cycle.
And it's not the good thing that I like is that it's not faked. It's not a
Hmm.
situation where, oh, I got to fake it till I make it. It's like, no, I can acknowledge that I don't feel my best. I can acknowledge that this situation sucks. I can acknowledge that my emotions are everywhere, but I can also acknowledge the great things in other people, which will help me to see the best things in myself.
You're reminding me of a conversation, what, days ago, whatever day today is and Sunday, however many days apart that is, because time makes no sense anymore. But I was at 5, surprise, surprise, and saying hello to my friend Kyle. And usually I'm the person that walks in now. It's so funny too to think back years ago where I walked in that first Saturday afternoon to do a rehearsal. I had never been in the space. I didn't know, I knew Josh walking in, but I knew no one else. Now I walk in and it's like 10 minutes in, I've already said hi to 10 people who are my friends. And so I'm walking around, I say hi to Kyle and how are you? You know, kissing the cheek, hi, hi, hi. And then we move over. It's like, how are you doing? Good. And then he looks at me. He's like, how are you really? And to have friends who are willing to do that is incredible because, and it's time and place. And sometimes, you know, in the middle of a show, maybe you're not going to be like, how's life? How are you doing? How's it going? Real talk necessarily. But this was before the show. Nothing's really happening. It's quiet. And we had this moment. And it was, how are you really? And I don't even remember all the things we talked about, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, some days it's pretty terrible, but overall I'm okay. And he said, you know that it's okay wherever you are in any of those days. And having that acceptance and permission that if you're having an awful day, have an awful day. You don't need to. I was talking about how I feel like I have this pressure because I hear you're so strong, you're so inspirational, which is it's a lovely thing to hear and it's so kind, but it also puts a pressure on me that it's like, well, you say I'm strong, so I have to be strong. And you say I'm inspirational, so I have to be inspirational. And as a cancer survivor, there are times where I think, well, I have to do so many amazing things with my life because I'm still here. Like I'm here. I made it through that. So it's almost this obligation to be amazing, which is kind of exhausting and challenging for
Yeah,
me.
that
So
can
to
be
have this friend
torture.
say, you don't just be, yeah, you are strong because you are who you are. But if someday you're falling apart, that doesn't mean you're still not a strong person.
Right,
I think
right.
I knew that, but just hearing it again. So Kyle, he's the best.
But I like that you say that. Sometimes we do look for that permission or validation from others to reassure us of where we are.
Hmm.
It's like I know that I'm supposed to be strong. I don't really feel what strong is right now, or as strong as I know it to be. Um, and because of that, like I feel like I'm letting down all those people who complimented me, all those people who validated me in my strength. And now that I feel weak, I'm almost less of a person because of that.
I'm not who, it's that feeling of I'm not who they say I am. Like I'm a
Yeah,
fraud. Like, oh, they say I'm strong and here I am
bawling my
bawling to
eyes
the love
out, like,
songs, just
yeah.
just not doing anything other than crying. And think, no, that's, and I think there's this misconception of falling apart and crying being weak. I think it's not. I actually think it's kind of strong.
It takes a lot to acknowledge your emotions and feel those feelings.
Hmm.
It does. It takes a lot. It's very easy to sweep things under the rug. Very easy to ignore things, but to acknowledge it and to face it and to honor what that is, it's work. It takes a lot of work. So I absolutely agree that it's a strength to be able to manage those emotions. Um, but we also have to remember that our validation doesn't lie in other people. We have to allow ourselves the permission to feel those feelings, whether we feel great, whether we feel antagonized, whether we feel sad, whether we are depressed, whether we have these intrusive thoughts or whatever we're feeling about a situation. It's okay to feel the feeling, it's okay to acknowledge the feeling, but that doesn't mean that's the whole story. That's just your reaction to whatever the situation is. So regardless of, people complimenting you, oh my gosh, you're so strong, I would be, crawled in a corner and all this, and it's like, well, mentally that's where I'm at. So this is just masking for the sake of no one else falling apart at this point. But I would absolutely be crawling in the corner by myself and crying my eyes out. But I feel like people should, especially going through traumatic events, give themselves permission to fall apart, because when you rebuild, you're always stronger.
Hmm.
And if you never fall apart, it makes it harder to have that rebuilding phase. And I don't know if you've ever seen something when it's been, like, if you think about like a china plate or something, when it's been broken and they've had to use um other pieces like gold, silver, other metals, and glues to put it back together. It's always bigger. And one of my friends, Jessica, amazing person, um, we talked about the idea of breaking circuits And what happens when you overload a circuit and it shorts, you have to get a bigger one to contain all of the circuits and all of the wiring that it has to do. And that's the same thing with us. Sometimes our circuits overload. We have circuit breaking events in our life, so we have to allow those things to happen so that we can realize, oh, my circuit breaker needs to be a little bit bigger. Like, my heart is going to grow a little bit more. My backbone is going to be more firm after this, or my voice is going to be louder when advocating in this space for whatever the reason. You know, it's we have to understand that we have to give ourselves that permission. And once we give ourselves that permission, then we're able to move forward in strength, not just positively, but we're able to move forward in strength, going toward a goal, regardless of what that goal looks like for each of us.
Absolutely. I like the circuit breaker analogy.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool when she said it. I was like, oh, I'm going to use that, right? She's like, yeah. I said, okay, cool, 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 cool,
Thank you.
cool. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I've absolutely appreciated it. Um, you can go ahead and plug any social media, any events, anything that you have going on, especially your book, where people can find it, where people can find you if they want to follow you, or ask you if you're available, ask you any questions about, you know, resources or guides that you can offer, if they have a family member or if they themselves are dealing with cancer. Maybe you're able to offer an encouraging word or a resource or anything like that. So now's your time. Go ahead and plug away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me and having me here. So the easiest way, there are two easiest ways to find me. The biggest thing is you have to spell my name right. So if you want to follow me on social media, that is the challenge because my name is Jaimie and it's not spelled in the way that most people spell Jamie. So it's Jaimie. So that's Jaimie. Jaimie Sherling. So Jaimie Sherling, you can find me on Instagram. Us the other place to find me, and we didn't even get into this today, and that is okay because gears have shifted, but I created a clothing line for my sister breast cancer survivors. And you can find the clothing. You can also find more about me. And my book is also linked there. So YDY Sweets. And it's just the letters YDY. Sweets is SWEETS. And that's YDY Sweets. You do you. And I will say that is my lasting advice for everybody, whether because we're all going through hard stuff and maybe a diagnosis, maybe the end of a marriage, maybe just a bad day. And you do you. You take care of yourself and whatever that means for you. And I will say those hard times, if there's any way you can find joy, good luck and go for it. And if you can find joy, great. But as we've also talked about, if you need to fall apart and just sob for a long time, do that too. So whatever way you can take care of yourself, that's the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'll make sure to tag if whatever links that you all need are going to be in the show notes. So make sure you check the description box and check out YDY Sweets to make sure you order your merch. Also, check out her book, Queens to Queens. And I wholeheartedly appreciate you for being on the show. Your story is going to help so many people. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Um, Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Face Podcast. I've been your host, Leah, joined by Jaimie Sherling. Thank you so much again for being on the show. Please make sure to go follow Jaimie. Also, make sure to follow us at Take a Face POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we're also on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe. And make sure you share this with those who may need an encouraging word, because I'm sure if it helped you, it'll help someone in your circle. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a great one.